Yes, welcome back. You're still watching Power Breakfast on Citizen TV. We now want to take a look at what's happening nationally, both on the headlines and some of what we are hearing that's happening on the ground with regard to party primaries. This morning we're privileged to have in studio Agnes Zani, the ODM Party Secretary General. Good morning, Madam.
Good morning, Asante sana.
So much is happening, and quickly, probably we could start with what's happening in Kisumu, because that's the latest news. We do understand that by last night, according to the tally, the returning officer declared Senator Anyang' Nyong'o the winner of the ODM party ticket for the governor's race. Then a few hours later, we got information that another official declared Jack Ranguma the incumbent winner of that particular contest, and both candidates now do have, or both aspirants now do have, a party certificate. Now, what does that mean? Because now definitely there's confusion there as well.
Yeah, these incidences have happened, and as much as we had arrows on the ground who were to give us the final tallies and to make the announcement for the winners, I think something somewhere in between has happened, and you're finding a situation where you're having the double declarations. But that is not the utmost results. You saw us yesterday for Migori and Homa Bay suspending some of these results. So most of these results are going to come back again to NEB. We're going to have audit of the tallies and then make the final pronouncement. But we had expected that we wouldn't have this sort of situation, because really when the tally has been made, it becomes clear who has won and who hasn't won. But I think sometimes there's a lot of pressure coming from different directions. Remember, these are human beings and these are players, also sometimes political players with their own political interests. And as much as they've gone through training, they have been asked to do the work properly, and they have really been empowered in that direction, we're finding this sort of situation. So that means, as per now, because it's very easy to audit, I know from NEB, there were certain features that they have put specifically so that they can be able to identify even the ballot papers. So after audit, extensive audit, and all this material is being kept until that final time, then we will be able to make a pronouncement.
But my understanding is that from the point of the National Elections Board, it should be pretty obvious who has the authority to declare a winner in any of these contests.
Exactly, that's what happens, and that's what is meant to happen theoretically. But on the ground, you're finding either people who are coming on board and making those declarations, or you're finding, for example, somebody called me yesterday and told me there's one person who even was sort of coerced to make that sort of a pronouncement. So I think all these cases become investigation cases.
Are you saying that there could be confusion as to who is the bona fide returning officer for a particular, let's say, Migori?
What happens is that plans have been put into place, but if you look at the case of what happened, for example, in Nairobi, we actually had very clear lineups about who was going to do what. But at the last minute, we had another team coming on board as well, saying that this is the responsibility. So you find, and this is what I'm saying, you find that political players end up with political interests and end up coming into the fore and creating a situation. You remember very well, for example, that we already had our ballot boxes and our ballot papers very, very orderly and put into place. And really, let me take this opportunity to say to our supporters that what happened in Nairobi was unfortunate, but it was completely unprecedented. There was absolutely no way we're going to be able to move away from it. So we are finding ourselves in a situation where we need to make certain decisions at a particular time. Like for Nairobi, we had to look at the situation on the ground. Ballot papers had been taken, and therefore you cannot continue with that.
And we'll come back to the issue of Nairobi, because I'm
using that as an example to show you the difference of what happens from the planning and actually what happens in terms of execution on the ground.
My concern, Madam Zani, is the fact that ODM, National Elections Board, appears unsure about its own officials down there on the ground. That one particular official, one returning officer that we do understand is a returning officer, is, for example, Migori County, was it Samson Olala, makes a declaration, then someone else declares a different person the winner.
But there's no problem with that, because NEB is going to finally pronounce itself and say that this is the one that is making this pronouncement, and we're going to make an audit. Because as I've told you, you'll still find somebody who hasn't been given that authority. How is the NEB chair going to go there and stop that person at that moment when she's also planning for other events in the various places?
Does that therefore open the field for any aspirant who feels aggrieved by the results, just to ensure that that declaration is not final, just get someone else to declare you winner as well, so that it goes to the National Elections Board as a dispute?
You have players on the ground who specifically take authority and take responsibilities that they haven't been given initially, and they do that. But what you find is that the NEB is in control. The NEB finally will make itself, pronounce itself on this, and then find the way forward for the same.
But in terms of time, because now you have so many disputes to look at, now probably with the extension of the primaries again, will you really have enough time before May 10th?
Let me correct you first, before you say so many disputes that have to be done. You know, we have the National ODM Tribunal that is already in place. They have been sitting, and most of these cases are being looked at continuously, and we're finding that the repeats that are being set out in real time. So we're not going to have a backlog. In fact, as a party, we'd already planned that we'd finish on Wednesday, so that we'd have everything out of our tray. Remember, we had the days between 13th and the 26th to put everything together, so we'd already planned to put that all together in that way. Most of these disputes that are coming up in real time, and the body is already working and dispensing of this. So in cases where repeats have to be done, that repeat is being ordered for immediately.
You're saying the dispute resolution mechanism has been underway.
It is already underway.
But in case of something like a place like Taita Taveta, where we saw one person awarded a certificate, it was disputed up until now. In fact, by yesterday, those people are still at Orange House complaining that no result has been given. If the dispute resolution mechanism is already underway, then
I'll explain to you the case of Taita Taveta, because the dispute resolution mechanism put into operation and gave a particular way forward, but that way forward was not accepted. So it was again a dispute within a dispute. So we had to go back again. So what happened is that the specific polling stations, the five polling stations that needed to be redone, one group was happy to say that let it be redone. Another said, let's not have it redone. When the tribunal said that those counties those polling stations should have another polling done, one group said, no, we don't want to have that polling done. So it meant again a situation where a process would need that to go back again to the specific tribunal. As all this was happening, audits and more investigations were going on. You must appreciate that all this is happening in a field, and it's happening within various polling stations. So again, as a body, one has to look at what is coming from the ground, look at the evidence that is coming from the ground, make decisions. For example, some of the information was coming later. Issues, for example, like in certain polling stations, there was no accessibility because it was raining. In certain polling stations where no polling was said not to have been done, we actually had people who are coming with certificates from those polling stations.
And exactly that's what we are saying, that the case for Taita Taveta has taken over a week to resolve, and it's still not resolved yet. Now these others that are arising, Migori, Homa Bay, Kisumu,
we don't have to work with a particular time frame and to be in a hurry just so that we can give a result, so that we can have, for example,
but you're working with a certain timeline.
We're working within a certain timeline, but we cannot then ignore certain facts and certain points and certain new information that is coming up on board. So we just have to do what we have to do when we have to do it. Whatever is coming in, we're taking it on board, looking at it, assessing it, and then giving away.
So you're saying, in as far as Taita Taveta is concerned, that matter is still under investigation?
I'm not saying that it is under investigation, because we made the decision as well yesterday when we were giving the press conference, and specifically after the result of specific polling stations that already some results had been given, that really then it means polling had been done. On the basis of that, it was seen to be that there's no need to repeat. But I think even as yesterday, immediately after that, there's always information and counter information. I'm not saying something else come up, but there's always information, counter, and this is what I'm saying. That finally, I think there's two ways of handling this. One way of handling this is to quickly dispense of it and say, okay, this is the situation, this is the result, and it all.
Because eventually the party has to have a solid ground and say this is the final result.
And it will. In the long term, I think it will. So that is not a problem.
Is this correct? Because I can see Thomas Modegu here listed as one of the happy winners on the Standard.
Yesterday, that's what I've just told you.
So this is final.
After the presser yesterday, when we went on, we explained the situation. After that, there's been a counter reaction. So we're going to go back again and look at what the counter is. It doesn't mean that it nullifies. Don't twist my words. It doesn't mean that it nullifies. I'm just explaining how the situation is developing, and whatever comes. I'm not saying it's not final. Whatever comes will be put into consideration.
Okay.
Yeah. Wow. So we have to look at things in a step sequence, and I always say we have to look at the facts that are all coming up, because at the end of the day, primaries, and you look at the way primaries are conducted, for example, in other countries and in other industries, it's something that should actually solidify the base of a political party.
Yes.
Primaries, in essence, should not divide the party, because remember, after primaries, you're actually going into a main election where party has to hold together. And that's why through each of the processes, and I'll tell you some of the processes we've had within the various counties, trying to really push for consensus, trying to talk to the people and say, you know, find a way that you can agree who is going to move and how you're going to support that person, because ideally that's what is going to happen. And we know of countries where, for example, at the beginning of the process, primaries are very conflict driven, but as they move towards the end, there is a level of consensus that needs to be built. And that's why, even as we work within our tribunal, we have to be very careful not to create a sense of loser and a winner, because we're all winners. All these are members of the party to be embraced within the party.
Madam Zani, it is a competition. We expect that there will be winners and losers.
It is a competition, but it's a competition within a party. And I'll tell you, in many, many countries, that is a democratic process that finally people are able to just sort of have a convergence over time. Really, ideally, this process needs to have started a lot earlier. Usually, if it starts, let's say, about a year earlier, you're able to slowly build consensus. Identify who is your flag bearer. Identify all the issues that surround that particular constituency holder. Be able to canvass across the various issues. Be able to look at who can bring on board the face of the party that will be in competition when you're in competition with the other.
Now, in a short while, we'll be looking at some news that we got from Narok County. Yesterday, there was some violence, of course. Narok was one of the counties where Jubilee Party was carrying out its primaries. But just before that, in terms of the issues to do with ODM and its party primaries, a case in point, Busia.
Yes.
Busia happened, carried out its party primaries, perhaps among the very first ones. It was
about 2 weeks ago, because it was at the beginning.
Yes. Then there was a problem. It came to the party resolution mechanism, but one of the candidates or the aspirants said he will go as an independent. Has that matter now been resolved? Do you now, is it final now?
Let me explain that matter and explain how it actually brought the acrimony, because you remember at the beginning when the voting was taking place, we had Honorable Otoma on the lead before the Teso North and Teso South now votes came into being, and actually an analysis, because I think again this also puts light about how votes are counted and how votes come in, because I think when you have votes coming in initially from one side where somebody has a lot of support, and unfortunately I think this division cuts across quite a number of counties, especially where you have a minority and majority group, for example. This is what is also playing up again in Taita Taveta, where we have the Taita, we have the Taveta. This is also what is playing up, for example, in Kwale County, where we have the Duruma and the Digos. So you find a sense of feeling that, okay, this has been the chance for one person, now this is the side for the other person. So it becomes actually an equation about marginalization and how people want to deal with that marginalization. And I think that's what happened. So we had a situation where we found at the end of the day, so many votes that are coming from Teso North and Teso South will suddenly come up when we obviously thought we had a leader or we had somebody who was leading the team. That again came to the arbitration, but I think Honorable Otoma actually gave in his letter and actually said that he was going to go as an independent candidate. And
that made the work for the party much easier?
Well, that is what he said he wanted to do. He presented that to the party, and that's the position.
So as it is, Sospito Jamong will be the ODM candidate?
As things stand, Paul Otoma has given his resignation and said that he's going to go in as an independent candidate, leaving
Sospito Jamong as the only other
at the moment.
Yes. Okay. But that is there a possibility that could change?
Well, let's leave it at that.
What could change that scenario unless now Paul Otoma decides to come back to the party?
And might he not? I mean, that's what I'm saying. Let's wait. You know, I don't know why you want to have a conclusion immediately. Let us wait and see.
Okay. So let's talk briefly about what's happening in other areas of Jubilee before we come back to ODM, and I know we'll talk about why you needed to postpone the Nairobi situation and other things that are happening, including a planned mega rally at Uhuru Park that was slated for tomorrow, 27th. That was before the primaries were extended, and how does that affect tomorrow's date? But we'll come to that. But looking at the headlines, and you can see quite a number of incumbents from Jubilee strongholds losing out. You can see Cleophas Lagat in Nandi, Benjamin Cheboy, Joseph Ndavi, William Kabogo appears to have conceded yesterday. That's happening a lot on the Jubilee side, but when it comes to ODM party primaries, incumbents seem to be very strong. Is it simply coincidental?
I don't think it's coincidental. I think what has happened in terms of the Jubilee side and this sort of thing happening, I think also depends on the way the politics plays out. Because, for example, you're finding like somebody like Kabogo, for example, has come out already and said, you know, I have lost in this particular race. I think what we're seeing is a situation where maybe on the Jubilee side, whatever result is coming out, we are not looking at a situation where this result is, there's one person giving this result and that is the final result.
It's not as contested.
Probably, but we are finding on our end situations where we need to be able to still come up and find out exactly what is happening. As I've told you before, party unity is very, very critical. And we want to move into this situation and into the election as a united party rather than a disenfranchised party. But I think what is also happening, I think should be put within a statistical format of what really happens, and the sort of over time very clear pattern that exists. Like, for example, the incumbents coming back is about at maybe 70%. Most of them, the people who come back, are about 30%. The level of incumbency being removed is much higher, and that's what we must be experiencing.
But in ODM it appears that more incumbents are likely to retain.
But you see, I think you're looking at a situation where that definitivism has not been put into place. You know, until you wait, until when we come up with the lineup.
It's a
sorry,
simple,
Fred, you have to. No, sorry, Fred. It's a simple sample, but you're forcing the sample. Unfortunately, I think you need to be able to wait. But I think what will be interesting to look at finally, when all this is done, is to look at pattern of who has finally come back. What were the issues surrounding that particular person during the time when they were a leader? For example, in terms of those who are governors, what did they do? What did they don't do? Some of, I think, the news that has come across particular governments and the particular ways that have been operated would have to be correlated with the result that has come out in terms of people feeling that surely, generally, this is somebody who did not deliver, for example.
Do you think it's down to the party and how the party handles issues? Because we're seeing a lot of aspirants from the Jubilee side conceding. William Kabogo is one of them who appears to have conceded yesterday defeat. In Nandi, Cleophas Lagat appears to have done the same, Benjamin Cheboy, and all these other individuals. But we're not seeing that in ODM party primaries, because every primary we've seen in ODM has been contested. And that no one is willing to accept the result.
I don't think no one is willing to accept the result. Everybody will be willing to accept the result once every fact has been put into place and people are very clear about what happened. Because if you have a situation, for example, like the one we have in Taita Taveta, where certain police stations were covered, the assertion in certain police stations have not been covered, surely, Fred, it is very clear that you must deal with that first. And when it is very clearly put that this is what happened, and somebody sees for sure, because I think for various individuals, people are different, and for example, maybe some of the people might have seen it coming because of what was happening and how they build up to it, and maybe they're psychologically prepared themselves.
But they're just not ready to accept it.
But I think finally, there's only one position with only one person who can be able to fit it. So I think finally...
But you're not seeing a pattern here that in Migori it's been contested, in Homa Bay it's been contested, in Kisumu it's been contested, Taita Taveta.
But we're looking at it in terms of the circumstances, in terms of what is happening, even when that contesting is actually happening. But we're saying we're still in the process. We haven't reached the end of the process. Let's wait until we reach the end of the process, make that declaration, and we'll have this, I think, also concede, and then we'll be able to move together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a break. We'll be back to discuss other issues, and of course we'll give you that update from Narok, as well as ask Madam Zania to tell us what happened in Nairobi that forced the ODM party to postpone its party primaries that were initially to be held yesterday, and now will be held on Sunday.